Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of this game dev diary for Pedro's adventure. This time I'll be taking you through the random dungeon generation of the first dungeon that Pedro will be going into. And as you can see, it's completely different to the forest and the village that we're used to, and this tile here symbols the kind of entrance that Pedro's meant to have come in, and Pedro gets spawned next to a wall in a room. So each time that you enter a dungeon, it's going to be randomly generated, so it'll look different each time. And each time that the dungeon is generated, then you're not spawned in a certain room each time. The room that will be starting room will be different as well. So it means that you could be starting in like this one, which has got multiple paths, so we can either go and search what's down here or right, or sometimes it'll be quite clear that you have one way to go depending on how the dungeon layout is. So we'll just take a wee walk through this dungeon and talk about the overall kind of idea behind this random dungeon generation. So the idea is that we rooms are generated, and the rooms are like highlighted by this here, and we generate a random amount of rooms, place them on a random grid, and then connect the rooms through a series of corridors. Once all the rooms have been connected, then we place what I have called in the code unwalkable doodads. So things like here, like this column here, you can't walk past it, so it means it'll give the player some cover from enemies that fire, and enemies will have cover from the player. Just kind of make the dungeon a bit more interesting, having like a bit of cover in between the characters, so that the bow and arrow or whatever the enemy's going to be shooting at you, it's not too overpowered. So you can see you've got a barrel here, another kind of broken column, broken maybe falls, and then we have these walkable doodads that you can walk over. So you can see this is just maybe a pile of dust and bones or whatever, and we can walk over them, and they're randomly placed about the dungeon too. So that kind of sums up the dungeon generation at the moment. As you can see, there's no enemies. That will be done after at the moment I'm busy working on the inventory system for this game, and with that I'm tweaking how damage is calculated and what the weapons do. So for that I decided that not to create the enemies for this dungeon yet, to work on the inventory system, and once that's done then go back and make some enemies for this, because I think the inventory system and then how I redo combat is going to be significantly reworked. But combat will be reworked, and the effect that has on the game will be quite large, so I didn't want to just make some enemies to have to go and change them later. So what I should say about these doodads actually is that the walkable ones that we can walk over, can be spawned anywhere in a room, so it doesn't matter if it gets placed in front of a corridor. But the unwalkable doodads can only be placed in the center of a room, and what I mean by the center is that they can't be placed on the edge. So you can see there would be no unwalkable doodads around this area. This kind of the algorithm knows where the edge of the rooms are, so it knows where the corridor walls here. So you don't want to, by chance, having an unwalkable barrel or something you can't get past to spawn in front of a corridor door, because it means you can get past it. So by allowing that these are only spawned within the center of a room, it means you can get past them. So that kind of really sums up the overall idea behind the dungeon generation system. So we'll come out of this and we'll look, and this, because I'm using Unity and the 2D tool set, rather than looking at the game tab, we'll look at the scene, and you get a kind of more overview of what's going on of the whole scene. So we'll switch to this, and you can see Pedro in the entrance here, and that's what the overall dungeon looked like this time. And if we do it again, just go out and spawn another dungeon, we can see that it'll be fairly different. Pedro and the entrance are up here, and it's a completely different dungeon layout. How it works is, I'll go into it a bit more detail now, is that you specify the number of rooms and you specify the size of the grid. So I think the grid's about 40 by 40 here, and you specify the amount of rooms you want to place, and I'll go through and try and place that amount of rooms. And then one room is identified as the first room that you want to connect, and we'll say it is this one. So this room, so there will be no corridors to start off with, and then you dig out the corridors. So this room, pardon me, might be possibly the first room to connect, and then it searches how close each center of the room is, of all the other rooms are, to this room. So it'll calculate the distance from the center of this room to this room, this room to that room, this room to that room, and all the rooms, and it'll look for this room that's basically closest to it, and it'll find the room that's closest to it, and it'll try and connect the two. So for argument's sake, we'll say that this room is the closest room to this room, which it probably is. Then it doesn't check to see whether if it can place a straight corridor between the two. So it checks along the y-axis, if we call the up and down axis the y-axis, if there's any overlapping between the rooms, and we can see in this case there is overlapping between the y-axis between the rooms, so we can do a straight corridor between the two, and then that is dug out, and then this room is highlighted as the one to try and connect. So this room and this room will be removed from the list of rooms to check for distances to connect, and it'll search every single room that's left for the closest room, and it'll come up with this one, and then it'll say it'll say is there any overlapping between the rooms in the y-axis, and again this time there is, so it'll dig out a straight corridor between these two rooms. Then this room will be removed from the list of rooms looking to be connected, and this will be highlighted as the room to connect to next. So then I'll do a search for all the remaining rooms, the closest one, which will be this one. I'll do the check on the y-axis if it's overlapping, and it's not because it's on the left of it. And then I'll check on the x-axis, which is if we call the left and right axis, and I'll say yeah, there is overlapping between the left and right axis, so then I'll dig out a straight corridor. So the only other case I really need to talk about is then if the rooms aren't overlapping in the x or y axis, as you can see for this one and this one. So it would have been highlighted that this room wanted to connect to this room, and I would have done the check for are the rooms overlapping in the y axis, and you can see that they're not, that there's no part of the rooms that overlap below or above for this room and this room. And then I'll check the x axis, is there any parts of the rooms that overlap between here and this room, and there's not. So what that means is that there's going to have to be a corner in the corridor. It's going to have to change direction at some point, and it's pretty obvious now once I talk about it, but what really helped me when I was coding this out was that if you're leaving the north or south door of one room, then you're going to want to go into the west or east door of the other room. So because of this corner, it means that if you're leaving a room in the either upper or lower of it, then you're going to go into the next room either in the left or right. The same as if we're leaving a room in the west or east, you're going to be wanting to go into the next room in the north or south. Because of this corner, you're changing the axis of what way the corridor is going. So that's kind of handy, because if we know, we can check whether if this room is wanted to be connected to this room. Sorry, we're trying to connect, dig the corridor this way basically. So we know that this room is below that room, so we know we want to leave from the south door, and we know that this room is on the right of this, so we know that we want to connect it to the west, so we know that we want to leave from the south and go to the west. And then all we do then is pick one of the tiles along this wall to start with, and which is randomly chosen again, and then we dig south until we choose what one of these where we want to go into on this room, and then once we reach the same level as where we have the door in this, then we just dig to the right. So that means that each room now has, that this room, that the south door has a value, and in this room the west door has a value, and that's saved so that when you're trying to connect a room to another room, then there wouldn't be two entrances normally, that the rooms will try and use this door as well, so that means you can sometimes get choice on what way to go. And sometimes you also get rooms with two entrances, but it's because the closest room actually now is further away than a room that's in the way, so I'll actually put a whole corridor through the room, which is kind of confusing sounding, and it took me a while to work out what was going on, but it gives for some quite interesting dungeon shapes. So that basically covers the random dungeon generation that I'll be using in Pedro's adventure. It works quite well. I think you get some quite interesting dungeon shapes, with spawning Pedro in a different position each time. Sometimes he's in the middle of the dungeon like this one, sometimes he is at the edge, and it'll be different each time. So continue and work on the inventory system, and then put enemies in here, and then I'll be working on the loot system, I think. So progress is going well. The next video I imagine will be about the inventory system and how that's going to work, and describing that. So thanks for watching this video. As always, if you have any questions or any feedback on the game, please leave that in the comments. I do appreciate everybody that takes the time to give me any feedback, and at this stage it's still early enough in development that changes are easy enough incorporated, so please do leave a comment on what you think of this game, and thanks again for listening. Cheers, bye.